Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I'm Rivka.
And I'm Frank. And live from both of our respective homes, it's Saturday night. I'm starting to do this thing where I tease our A-block topic in a little fun intro.
I like it. It's good.
Did you? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it. So
I did not run it by you ahead of time, so that was a genuine fresh reaction.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Saturday Night Live 50.
Saturday Night Live and the 50th. And if this is your first time listening to this podcast, right here in the A block, we do something, we talk about something in the news so that you know when and where this podcast was released. And then in about like 15 minutes, we get to the movie conversation. So don't worry if you came here to hear all about Bob Dylan, we're going to get there. But first we just wanted to talk about the SNL 50, the 50th anniversary show. We have not watched it in its entirety. Just full disclosure to the audience, I am going to watch it at some point.
I may too.
And we've talked about SNL.
May too.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
We've talked about SNL here and there throughout the course of this podcast, but
it's definitely
always good for a little refresher.
Yeah. You have much more of like a history with SNL than I do. Although I do feel like quite the couch historian because I was sick and they had all of these so much SNL like documentary content and I got sucked right in. And I also watched the SNL movie on a plane ride. So I was like in the spirit for it. Which is the lore is very exciting. Like it's to me, the lore and the history and like the idea is much more exciting than when I turn on the show and then I'm like, this is gonna be and then I'm like, I get a laugh or two.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's SNL is culturally totemic. There is literally nothing else like it in American entertainment. A live sketch comedy show that has been running for 50 fucking years, which is wild. SNL was definitely much more important to me when I was younger. High school was like the Kristen Wiig. Sorry. High school was like the Will Ferrell, Molly Shannon, Sherry O'Terry, Chris Kattan cohort, and then rolled right into the whole Amy Poehler, Tina Fey, Andy Samberg, Bill Hader. So that era, Kristen Wiig, that era, was very important to me, especially as a young, theater kid who loved doing comedy. Yeah, we fucking loved it. And then, you learn more and more about how the show is produced, about the ironclad grip that Lorne Michaels has over everyone and everything. The people who have come out of SNL and have said, that was the most traumatic like creative professional experience of my life. And then you start to have to, renegotiate.
Which I think is like everybody seems to say. Even at the end of watching like the documentary, you're like, yeah, it should be traumatic. Like you just get on, you know what I mean? You're like, yeah, I was like, fuck, I'm back at Whiplash headspace again. But like, you're like, yeah, you know what? Like, because that's how daddy loves you.
It should be grueling. You should be killing yourself week to week for the approval of this fucking old multi-millionaire.
Yeah.
From Canada, no less.
Yeah, no, fascinating. I mean, really, yeah, I thought that, again, the documentaries were fascinating, but we were trying to think about, we're like, what do we talk about since we haven't watched the actual 50th? But we did realize there was some heat in the press about, I guess MAGA was really upset and people were upset because Tom Hanks plays a MAGA character. So we're like, let's watch the sketch. Let's talk about it. So we just are fresh off watching the sketch. And at the end, I'm like, oh, Frank, that whole sketch was like 7 minutes. And the part everyone's so upset about is like 30 seconds, like a minute.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
So I'm confused, but
I mean, yeah. So there's been a big in the Black Jeopardy sketch. Tom Hanks comes in right at the end wearing a MAGA hat in some flannel, doing a Southern accent, and the bit is Keenan walks up to him to shake his hand, and Tom Hanks recoils at a black person walking up to him, extending their hand, and then eventually he's like, oh yeah, I'll shake your hand. But yeah, Republicans, conservatives, MAGA, Fox News, in an uproar, an absolute uproar over this depiction of a Trump voter. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. I mean, there's the first we could start with like the liberal analysis, which is, you guys are always saying that, liberals don't have a sense of humor and that, we're the ones trying to cancel you, but now you're all mad about a joke in a sketch show. Looks like you all actually have some thin skin and can't take a joke.
Snowflakes.
Which is, yeah, exactly. Which is true to an extent, like Republicans and their media apparati, are rife with hypocrisy on stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like they'll say the most disgusting, horrific shit, and then anytime someone even lobs like a mild joke their way, they clutch their pearls. It's we know this, we've seen this, but so if we're going to go more with like a leftist analysis, I think shit like this is super unhelpful. I think it is super counterproductive to building any sort of working class solidarity, helping people achieve some version of class consciousness. And it's honestly one of my least favorite liberal tendencies, which is to like make fun of, talk down to, condescend to, and disparage people who voted for Trump. Which, I want to be careful here. Like, there are some Trump voters who are truly awful, racist, sexist, homophobic, violent people, for sure. That should never, ever be excused. But a lot of people who voted for Trump just don't fucking know any better because we've been lied to and propagandized to in this country for such a long time. And
no, totally. And also, I just think, if there was really something to say, it would be funnier. Like, that's just where I'm, you know what I mean? That's just where I'm always like, it's just not funny because there's not any truth there. Like, it's so thin. It's so, I don't know. The funniest thing I thought in that whole sketch, which was unrelated to this, was I did think that Eddie Murphy's impression of
Tracy
Morgan. I thought Eddie Murphy's impression of Tracy Morgan was actually so funny, which is odd because Tracy Morgan doesn't make me laugh on his own, but like it was such a good impression. I thought that was funny. But yeah, I'm with you. It's not useful, and it's not funny. Not useful nor funny.
It wasn't. Yeah, definitely was not that funny. But there's like that. What is it? It really is that elitist sensibility that Republicans hurl at liberals, at Democrats, which is true sometimes. There is very much, and sometimes it's overblown, but there is very much this sentiment from the liberal Democratic establishment, from wealthy upper middle class liberals, of like, oh, we actually know better, and it's so sad that you are so stupid that you don't know any better. So that's why it's okay for us to talk down to you and make fun of you sometimes. And if only you knew better and stopped voting against your own interest. And yeah, that's also something I've been hearing from friends, family members who are more liberal. And I really try to push back on that and be like, yo, like a lot of these people are just working class people who have just been economically trampled for the last 4 decades, and they have no fucking idea. And they voted for the guy because he was the only one that was like, this whole fucking thing is broke, I'm going to do something about it. It's really that simple. And then,
I will say, I didn't take it as like being like, this means all MAG. You know what I mean? Like, I also wasn't reading it into it like that deeply either. Of like I do think it's silly to get so upset about that one particular sketch that was 30 seconds.
Sure.
It was like,
sure.
That was like ridiculous. That's why I was like, what are we? Okay. I just watched it. All right. But yes. So here we are.
Yes.
It's just, there's some really like much funnier stuff happening. I think there's been so much great humor on the left. So, and we'll try and have some more of those comedians on. But like, I do think like truth and humor go well together. Like, the more truthful, the more honest about the situation, the funnier it is.
Yeah, that's like
Punch
those are
up.
the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the best moments in stand-up comedy or any kind of comedy, but specifically stand-up because it gives comedian a real opportunity to point to universal truths and maybe ones that we haven't realized or considered and find the funny angle to it. And like that is, I mean, that's why I got into comedy writing, is because I was like, oh, there's so much power in comedy if you can just harness it correctly. And this was not that.
This was not that. But somewhat related. I guess we're talking about Complete Unknown. Timmy Chalamet was on, I think, the 49th episode. Because after I watched that documentary, I was like, I'm in the mood. I'm gonna check this out. Yeah, like I want some laughs, and I couldn't believe how funny it was. Even Timothy Chalamet, one of my favorites.
I haven't watched the full episode because you had mentioned it to me that you thought his musical performances were very
God,
bad.
I'm so happy.
You thought the sketches were bad as well.
I'm so happy we recorded the episode that we're going to listen to before I saw it, because it would have tainted a lot of. Yeah, the sketches were bad. The music was bad. He like does these unknown Dylan tracks kind of as himself. I didn't understand. I was like, what is... Yeah, I think like kind of related to what we're talking. It feels very inside baseball in a way that's like not connected to the working class or like the reality at all. Like reality. It just feels so disconnected from reality.
Well, that's the thing about what SNL has become, which I think speaks to this detachment we're talking about, is that SNL itself has become a massive power structure within the entertainment industry, specifically within NBC Universal that owns it and runs it. And SNL started as a countercultural thing. You know, it was like the weird kids doing shit that you couldn't believe that they were saying and doing on television, and like, how are they getting away with this? And
they were the underdogs.
Gerald.
At one point they were punching up all the time,
but now they are power. You know, Lorne Michaels he wields so much fucking power. He also controls like all of NBC's late night slate. Like, Lorne Michaels has so much power. So now if you're going to work at SNL, and if you're going to thrive in the current environment that is SNL, you can't really challenge power that much because you are operating within power.
That's right. Yeah.
It makes me think of I remember like a few months ago when all the Luigi Mangione stuff was breaking and still very much in the news. Colin Jost during Weekend Update made a joke about, I forget the actual joke, but basically he made like a completely, like, first he said Luigi's name and the audience cheered, and you can see him being like, huh?
I'm like, so confused.
Yeah. And then he made a joke about like something about like why supporting Luigi is hypocrisy. And the audience did kind of like like a little groan laughter. And you could see Jost, who I fucking can't stand. I don't know him. I don't know shit about it, but I'm like, I fucking hate you, Colin Jost. You just seem like someone that I would not like in real life.
Wow.
But this was, I mean, this is just coming out. This is coming out naturally. But yeah, you could see him because he is the head writer of SNL now. So like that is someone who has
lots of power.
He has bent the knee to power and has been operating within this system. So like, of course he's so far removed from a real working class experience that when people cheer for Luigi, he's like, huh? I don't understand. I have great health insurance. What? Oh, it doesn't make any sense to me. All right, well, that's it on SNL. So let's, I think, move on to our movie conversation.
Yeah.
But before we do, we just want to remind our audience, if this is your first time, that we do not sell ads on this show. We rely on community support to keep the show going. And if you'd like to do that, you can subscribe to our Patreon account.
That's right. For just $5 a month, you get access to new bonus episodes and our entire back catalog. Our Patreon link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com. Also, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes.
And a reminder that we donate our ad space. So if you're part of a leftist or progressive organization and you would like to run an ad with us, you can email us at moviesvscapitalism@gmail.com. Also, just a quick heads up. During this recording you're about to hear, Svetlana's radiator was on for only about the first 5-10 minutes. It's, it's a little,
you'll hear it. It's New York, but.
You'll hear it. It's New York, but it does go away after about 5 or 10 minutes, so do not fret. It is not there the whole time, but just wanted to give you a heads up so it does not surprise you.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with Svetlana Kitto to talk about A Complete Unknown.
Hey everyone, it's Frank here. So after the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles, Rivka and I just wanted to take a moment in this mid-roll spot to direct you to some online resources if you would like to contribute to the relief effort. Honestly, there are so many different organizations doing incredible grassroots organizing on the ground. It would be impossible to name all of them, but the Mutual Aid Los Angeles network has done an incredible job of putting together a massive list of all of the different places where you can help out. And you can find that list by going to mutualaidla.org. That's mutualaidla.org. They have a bunch of different opportunities from donating to volunteering. If you're able to help out in any way, this is going to be a long recovery for the people affected by these fires in LA. All right, everyone, stay safe. And now back to the show.
Today, we are joined by Svetlana Kitto. Svetlana is the editor at Dia Art Foundation. Her writing has appeared in Apartamento, Four Columns, Guernica, Bomb, Ursula, the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Cut, Vice, and elsewhere. Her book of interviews, Sarah Penn's Knobkerrie, an oral history source book, formed the basis of an exhibition at the Sculpture Center in the fall of 2021. As an oral historian, she has contributed primary material to archives and exhibitions at the Brooklyn Historical Society, Museum of Arts and Design, New York Public Library for Performing Arts, and the Smithsonian Archives of American Art. Svetlana, welcome to Movies versus Capitalism.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So happy to have you on. Svetlana and I are just like artist friends from the neighborhood, but we got to talk in film and I said, we got to have this conversation on mic. This is too good, film and politics. So thank you for joining us. But I didn't know all of this juicy stuff in your bio. This is very exciting. How did you get started in your work, in writing about art? And then I think you also said you had like a passion for writing, particularly about art and politics and that intersection.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a different world and economy, I would have been a political journalist of some kind, but I ended up working in the art world where I'm able to work on projects that I do that reflect the kind of thing I want to see in the world, working with artists that have ideas that I admire and, sort of positioning underrepresented artists like at the forefront. And, so I've gotten to do a lot of that type of work. And I started kind of more in just kind of like traditional journalism and ended up doing like cultural criticism. And then I'm trained as an oral historian, and that kind of led to doing, I've done a lot of activist projects as well, but, artist oral history, which led to working in the art world. Here I am.
That's very cool. Can I ask, it sounds like you're someone who is very principled in the way that you speak about art, learn about art, talk about art. We talk a lot on this podcast about how within these creative fields, these creative industries, there is always the conflict between art creation and the commercial side of things. I don't think we've actually interviewed anyone who has worked, in like mainly the art space, visual art and all of its different tendencies. So, without shit talking anyone specifically or too much or whatever, what has that been like for you to navigate?
It's an interesting question. I've had the privilege of doing projects that I want to do. Whenever you're talking about art publishing, you're immediately not talking about profit anymore because there is no money to be made in publishing. So, I've mainly I've never worked at like a big commercial gallery or anything. I imagine that if I was in that space, I would feel kind of differently. But I started working in the art world, working with a really small gallery that was doing a lot of work with outsider artists. And that was me just like writing about the work, interviewing the artists, and making these books. And I've made a number of books with different publishers, galleries, artist books. And I guess in this weird way, it's kind of a funny thing to think about, like, because I'm not trained as an art historian, and I'm not into, like, I'm not invested in the academy so much, or like academic writing. I feel like I actually bring, because of my journalism and like writing background, like more of a sort of interest in accessibility and being legible to like the general public and to bigger populations. So I don't feel like in this particular way, I don't feel like I've in my work had to think a lot about that.
God bless.
And I'm very lucky, I think. It's like, obviously, like if you're trying to make like a mainstream film, or I also write my own, I'm working on a novel, and I imagine that when I sell my novel, if that happens, knocking wood on right now, that I would have to make like compromises in that way, I would imagine. But because of like the kind of, in some ways I'm like, even though the art world feels very big to me, like the corner of it I'm in terms of like books and publishing, in some ways it's like very niche, and it's kind of outside of the realm of like, you know, how do we make, I mean, we do ask these questions at DIA, like how do we get the books to sell? But really, it's not like the primary question. Of course, that could change. I mean, I'm lucky to have the job I have. I know that. So
that's awesome.
That's great.
Well, I'm sure we're gonna get much more into the the complexities and the inherent contradictions of making art, especially commercial art, in our conversation about this movie, which you chose for us. So today we are talking about A Complete Unknown. Released in 2024, this film was directed by James Mangold with a screenplay by Mangold and Jay Cox, based on the book Dylan Goes Electric by Elijah Wald. This film stars Timothy Chalamet, who also is a producer, Edward Norton. Or actually, I'll read out who they're playing. Timmy is Bob Dylan. Edward Norton is Pete Seeger. Monica Barbaro is Joan Baez. Elle Fanning as
Susie. I left this blank because I stopped, because we'll get into the Susie character.
Okay.
It's not, yeah.
Elle Fanning as Susie. Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash. Dan Fogler, Norbert Leo Butz. Eriko Hatsune. Big Bill Morganfield. Will Harrison. And Scoot McNairy. This movie was made for roughly $50 to $70 million and has so far grossed $75 million worldwide. And we will be spoiling this film. But it's kind of unspoilable because it's kind of just like reading a biography. This is the story of Bob Dylan. Perhaps you've heard of him, in the early 1960s, who arrives in New York with his guitar and his revolutionary talent destined to change the course of American music. Forming his most intimate relationships during his rise to fame, he grows restless with the folk movement, making a controversial choice that reverberates worldwide.
Ooh. Okay, this movie was released on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2024, just last year.
That's when I saw it.
Yeah, me too. Our Christmas gift. Other films that we've covered from this year: Anora, The Substance, Alien, Romulus. I think those are the three. We did a bunch from 2024. And so, for some context, historically, we entered into this new year as Israel was continuing its genocide in Gaza, resulting in a growing Free Palestine movement in the US and around the world. Donald Trump was almost assassinated. Joe Biden stepped down as the Democratic nominee for president. Kamala Harris stepped in and then spent the campaign paying hollow lip service to her base and campaigning with Liz Cheney, resulting in Trump's reelection as president. And then in November, Luigi Mangione allegedly assassinated Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, in a politically motivated killing that set off a public debate over the murderous U.S. health insurance industry. I was telling Frank, I just feel like this has been the longest January. To me, that seems like it could have been ages ago.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely
between the fires and the executive orders,
Where'd Luigi go? Bring us back.
Make it stop.
Yeah.
Make it stop.
Yeah. Oh, they stopped. I mean, they stopped covering Luigi because the narrative got away from them. They knew it.
Yeah.
They were like, we literally can't show him anymore because we've lost the thread on this. But
well, he was also eclipsed, right? I mean, he was very much eclipsed by the news cycle. Like, there was no way.
Yeah. So Svetlana, the first thing we start the conversation off with is we ask our guest, why did you choose this movie to talk about on an anti-capitalist movie podcast?
Well, I'll say this. I'm like definitely a leftist, definitely an anti-capitalist. I saw this movie with a group of friends who are very smart, very progressive, and the whole time I was watching it, I thought that we were having the same experience, which for me was of really loving this movie. And we came out and my friends were like, that was terrible, blah, blah. And I was just, I was so surprised because I was really into it. And like, you know, I think it's interesting to talk about it in this context because I think the movie is ostensibly about politics, but like politically the movie is kind of like not really what's the word? On point. Like it doesn't reflect like progressive like politics of the time. So even though I have like I wear this very lightly, even though like I loved this movie, I'm also like completely willing to like trash it and understand that it's not a good movie necessarily. I can hold both things. So it seems like a fun one.
And
I love Bob Dylan. That's it.
Okay, great. Well, firstly, that's the 100% correct energy to come in here with. Something we talk about on this pod is like we do movies on this podcast that we absolutely love, that we adore, but we find the ways to critique them from our vantage point and hold both of those things simultaneously. I think you can love something while also critiquing it. In fact, we must.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you're a Dylan fan because I would love to pick your brain more. I did some cursory research, but I admittedly am not a huge Dylan fan. So I'm interested to hear your take on everything. I will start off and say I just saw this movie a few nights ago, so probably a little bit more fresh than the two of you. And I really enjoyed it. It's a great fucking time at the movies. It's a great time. I think it is a perfectly adequate middle of the road boilerplate music biopic. You know, they're not breaking form. We've seen this story a million times. Honestly, thank God they didn't do Cradle to Grave. And I'm glad that they just like focused on one period of his life.
Same.
The performances are fantastic. The filmmaking gets the job done. And then every 10 minutes, Timmy sings a Bob Dylan song and you're like, oh shit, yeah, this song is really fucking good. Hell yeah. So yeah, it scratches all those itches. And yeah, it's a perfectly fine music biopic that I enjoyed and would probably watch again because the performances, especially the musical performances, Timmy really kills it. We can get into more about him. But like politics wise, I needed to know more coming out of the movie, which we'll get into. But Riv, what was your first experience watching?
Well, yeah, I did watch it recently. I feel like it was a roller coaster with this movie. I will admit and take ownership of the fact that I had just gotten vaccinated for COVID and so I had COVID basically. I did the Moderna. It was the first time I got really sick from the vaccine. So I was sitting there I have a fever, and Christmas Day, I was pumped for it, and then it starts, and I just turned to my partner. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot I don't love this music. And now I'm here with a fever listening to this. So I appreciate, I got everything you were saying the first go round. I was like, this isn't adequately, this is a good movie. Timothy Chalamet continues to be a fucking amazing actor. I was blown away by the performances of Monica Barbaro and Elle Fanning. I thought all the women in this kind of and we'll get into it, but I felt like their performances were so desperately trying to tell the story that we wanted that was not on the page. I was not being allowed. They were trying, and they did a pretty the best they could to fill in all of this political emotional context with just their inner being, which was pretty astounding. And I watched it a second time because I have a SAG screener. So I watched it, and I have to say, watching it a second time, it grew on me much more. I think also just, it was amazing. Yeah, there was just what the themes that what kind of exactly what you were saying, Svetlana, what wasn't there became really intriguing, and how odd it was that this is clearly a movie, but you can't really tell this story without it being about politics. And yet somehow they did it. Somehow they did. And that
So
to
true.
me was fascinating.
Yeah.
Because like, Frank, yeah, you're like, you need so much, unless you know. And let's face it, like it's 2024, huge audiences are not going to have any context, not real context. And they really gave it to us in like a few words. It felt like I'm simultaneously watching Mad Men, and it felt very similar to me the way Mad Men gives like political context. I'm like, it's literally the same kind of, I feel like they almost show the Greenwich Village in the same way. Like it felt very AMC, glossy, like no depth, not a single image of anything of the real times, like any of like the depth of what they're really singing about or talking about, or what Pete Seeger comes from, or what Woody Guthrie comes from, like, and yet that is the underlying tension of the whole story. So I thought that was fascinating.
You get little snippets. You get like,
Snippets,
you
yeah,
get like
The civil rights rally.
Yeah, civil rights rally. What's his name? Walter Cronkite. Was it Walter Cronkite like broadcasting about Kennedy's assassination?
Right. Well, that's
There's,
what I
like,
mean in the Mad Men way. It's like very like, you get snippets that are like glossy and not emotional, and kind of, you could be like, news is happening. You know,
I mean,
I don't know.
I just watched it last night. I didn't finish it, but I went to BAM and watched like half, like up until 1965. Like that's the break. Because I feel like I don't need to watch this part again at all. But something I thought about this time was like, it actually kind of begins with the McCarthy hearing that, it's not the first scene, but it's an early scene where
Pete Seeger's at.
That's right.
And so my feeling was kind of like that's a lot. Like just that in and of itself, like to even include that when like naming names, it's all very elliptical. Like they don't tell, they're sort of expecting that the audience is going to know what the history of this,
right.
Like, this is like a gigantic historical context that like, yeah, a lot of people don't really know about. So there's that. And then there's also that I think that they're just trying to tell too many stories at the same time, actually.
Yeah.
Like hint at so many different things, hint at the political context, hint at how he sort of became more political in his work. And then also, the whole thing about the myth of Bob Dylan, Robert Zimmerman versus Bob, they're just kind of like dropping in so many little things that like, if you know a lot about the period, if you know a lot about Bob Dylan, you'll know what all those things are. But as a story, it doesn't really tell that story. It just sort of like signposts.
Yes, that's exactly right. It gives you just enough as an audience member to know, hey, some stuff's going on in the world. And it's like some serious stuff. And people are grappling with it. And this is how, even less so than the events themselves, these are how the people who Dylan was surrounded by during this time, during his like the most formative part of the beginning of his career, how they influenced him. But more than anything, I think the movie was just so interested in the fact that this guy was just like, I don't know, like a fucking like folk Jesus is kind of what I like walked away with. Like I felt like the movie really wanted you to know that this guy was an unprecedented generational talent, and every single person could not even believe how talented he was. and that was kind of like my biggest gripe with the movie. Like I needed 20 less shots of people watching him play music with like Spielberg awe on their face. Like, holy shit, that's the greatest song I've ever heard in my entire life. This is the greatest performance I've ever seen. It just felt very, it's not like a completely rosy portrait of Dylan, but it does frame him as like, yeah, folk Jesus. Like no one else has ever done this before. This is the most talented person who's ever lived. I
felt like it framed it, watching it this last time, I thought the where it ends, like the cards at the end where they give you like where everyone ended up kind of perfectly summarizes, I think, the attitude of the film. Because this time around, I was like, am I wrong? Or like, did they paint him like he's not likable? Like, he's so fucking not likable. So like, I agreed with my first self-watch on that. I was like, yes, it's intentional. But I think the Jesus part you're talking about, Frank, is like at the end, they're like, he's not likable, and yet you like him. Because, like, at the end, they're like, Pete Seeger goes on to be an activist, do all these amazing things till the day he dies.
Was
Joan
always
Baez
an activist.
Well, I'm just saying, like, this is like what they're saying in the cards at the end. Joan Baez continued her whole life to dedicate to, like, activism and all this amazing stuff. Dylan. And it's like, Dylan, he did he didn't really care, but like he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the Pulitzer,
the Nobel Prize for literature.
And then their point on it is, and he didn't show up. And like, so I felt like that was the attitude, like a little bit of the movie, like that's what's so cool, you know? And that was kind of
the unknowability of Bob Dylan.
And really, like, to me, watching it this time, it actually became this, like, again, I'm watching it for this particular podcast, but I felt like it was a horror movie about, and it was so much about, like, the generational pull of, like, how do you take this activism and this art from one generation, transfer it to the next, and not lose some kind of integrity or some kind of meaning to like the coolness that is being capitalized on, that like I felt in this rewatch Dylan falls prey to. And I thought the last scene where early on Woody Guthrie gives him, or I guess middle of the road, he gives Pete Seeger his harmonica to give to him after he's sort of like fall in love with him as his like protege. And then Dylan, after being like, electric baby, and like, you know, the whole arc of the movie, comes back, and in that last scene he tries to give it back to Guthrie, like, this isn't me anymore. And Guthrie, like, Scoot McNairy plays him, I thought, pretty damn well, and like he can't speak, and he like pushes it, he's like, please no, like he knows what he's seeing, like the political cause is sort of lost with this turning away of this whole movement, you know, which is kind of what I got on the second watch, was like, God, that's really, and I don't think the movie, like you said, I think it's trying to tell so many stories and it misses that. Like, that could have been so powerful to like, it's there's embers, it's certainly there, but to like focus in on that and like how
well, that was definitely
heartbreaking.
a gripe I had with the movie. On one hand, because this story of like Bob Dylan going electric is so like it's just this repeated thing over and over again. And like, you know, if you know Bob Dylan, if you don't know Bob Dylan, you maybe have heard something about that, this like break from the folk scene. So it's both overused as like a kind of thing about Bob Dylan to look at, and underexplained. Like, I was really, I mean, I was talking to, because I, like, one of the people I saw the movie with is also, she's like a real Bob Dylan fan, like much more than me, like grew up listening to him and like knows everything about him, like knows a lot more about his biography than I do. But also another person I know who loves him a lot, I was asking them, like, can you just explain to me why this thing of Dylan going electric was such a big deal? Like, what does it actually mean? Like, because to my ears, hearing, you know, Like a Rolling Stone or whatever the song was at the Newport, I'm like, this music does not sound that different to me. Like, it's still like super poetic, political, lots and lots and lots of words. You know, it's still just like that kind of style. There's just like plugged in instruments. So it was, I thought, like, again, and you could say this about a number of things in the film, like, if you're going to take this up and talk about it again, at least, like, can we really understand what it's about? Like, why are people driven to violence over this issue? Like, why is, like, sweet, like, feminized Pete Seeger, Edward Norton, like, about to cut the cables? Like, I was like, wow, this is like a really big deal to these people. And I still don't totally understand why. And this person told me that it's like a lot about just commercialism and capitalism and, you know, selling out. Like, these are the kinds of concepts that are like people are talking about and thinking a lot about at this time, which of course to like now it's like no one talks about selling out anymore. That's like, so no one cares about that anymore. It's like, but at that time it would have been, a really, you know, there's so much like, I don't know, stoic, like, nobility and like being able to just get up on a stage with a acoustic guitar and sing a song and like rile the crowd without any like amplification, I guess. But it was another example.
And just like you're saying, how selling out is so tied to capital and what's happening in the music industry, this folk music that was like, you're like, I mean, certainly Guthrie and Pete Seeger were like part of, they were communists. I mean, they really had their political, you know, in a way
Peter,
that
Paul,
I
and
think
Mary, also like extremely involved in the civil rights movement, were activists.
In a way that feels like Dylan, and it's told in this story too, but like seems like Dylan comes upon, absolutely makes music that is unbelievably everyone's like, this is unbelievable, but his struggle seems to be wanting to even take ownership. And so there was like this story. I so agree with you, Svetlana. Like there was no explaining. You're like, I'm seeing this, and yet the movie doesn't want to tell me any of its politics, which are so crucial to understanding the whole fucking thing. Because this is all political. Like, that's why they care so deeply. They care about the music, but he wanted to change. They want to change, and they reference it a little. There's the scene in the hotel room where they kind of go back and forth and sort of reference, like, you wanted to change the world isn't changing, to Pete Seeger, kind of like, you're an old man who, like, your dreams are fading. But again, it's all kind of like periphery throwaway lines that feel not, I think it's so integral to what's happening.
But they don't contextualize well enough that these other artists were very much embedded in the struggles of these times,
right?
You know, and how important those struggles were to them, not only as artists, but as people and as Americans and as people living in this world, a part of society. Like, we get glimpses of it, like you said, like Seeger's hearing, little moments here and there, but that is such a big part of why, from what I'm hearing you say, Svetlana, why this break from the folk scene was seen as such a massive betrayal. Because basically not only turning his back on the people that had helped raise them up, but also like the movements that these people were a part of.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of leads into another, I think probably for me, what, even though like I loved the movie while I was watching it, I was able to like understand that these, like, the women characters in the film were really thin and were really so one-dimensional, to the point where, like what you were saying earlier, Rivka, like they delivered, they did everything they could with that paltry script where they literally, the character Toshi didn't even have any lines.
Yep.
But she did so much face acting because that was all she was given the opportunity to do. So like, for instance, speaking to what we were talking about before, like with Joan Baez, like to sort of reduce Joan Baez to like a jealous, like immature girlfriend of Bob Dylan who just wants Bobby like to like let her sing his songs. I mean, it's pretty outrageous. And then also, this was something that I didn't know, but that my friend told me, that the character of who's called Sylvie in the movie, who's Elle Fanning, is based on the real life girlfriend of Bob Dylan's,
Susie
Rotolo, and that apparently she actually like had a really big influence on him politically. Like, she really is the reason why, this is what I was told, she's the reason why he started singing about like politics and the place of like, you know, sort of specifically Black civil rights in the US. Like, his sort of focus on that in his music really came from, yeah, she worked, you know, with CORE. She did like freedom rides, and he wasn't on that page, apparently.
Right. Apparently she was like a full-on red diaper baby.
For sure.
Italian radical New Yorker who was younger than him, he was 20 when he met her, she was 17. Like, yeah, exactly. And I mean, that part, you do feel that even in the movie, they couldn't hide from. You're like, he's just taking everything from every woman he meets.
Yeah, at one point she's like, I have core on those days. And he's like, wait, what's that? And he's like, he has no idea. He has no clue what's actually going on in the movement. He just happens to have been surrounded by these people who are deeply embedded in it. And was like, oh, this is something here. There's something going on here. Let me co-opt this.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a co-opting personally. Like, I think that at this moment in history, like, there would have been many people who fell into the movement and were genuinely interested in it. Sure. I think that I love Bob Dylan. Like, I think that the music that those particular songs that are about, like, what we're talking about, like, particularly, like, like the status of African Americans in the US at that moment in time. And then also, like, issues around labor and, like, class. Mm-hmm. I think we can get into a whole conversation of, like, is it Bob Dylan, or is he channeling, is he a conduit for, like, what's happening in the world? Either way, like, whether he truly believed it or not, I guess we'll never know. But if you just stick to the music, like, there's nothing insincere about those songs. I don't
True.
think.
You're absolutely right. I retract the co-op statement.
But I agree. But I do think in the film, the picture, if you have no context, the picture that's painted is like, it's co-opted, it's shallow. And it would have been so much more effective if we saw his journey of being, like, of how that transformed him. And you'd actually never see that transformation. What you see more is just how much he just, like, for some, like we're saying, hollowly rejects it all at some point, which really kind of in this movie, it came down to it. Like, he just was, like, kind of a teenager coming of age being like, that's actually cooler now. Like, that was kind of what he came off very shitty to me.
Well, the film isn't interested in his political evolution. It's interested in his artistic evolution. And, like, whatever politics come from that, or, like, we are to infer upon, are just sort of, like, ephemera to the fact that it was like, this is a true and true artist who cannot be held down, who cannot be tethered, who always needs to be exploring and experimenting and trying new things. And that's just who he was going to be. But not actually dealing with, his political evolution from that time. I want to read one quote that I found, because I was like, again, I don't know a ton about Bob Dylan. I did do some research. I was listening to one Normie Movie podcast where they were talking about how Bob Dylan, at a later point in his life, kind of rejected political songwriting and engaging with politics in the way that he had during this period. And I found a couple quotes. One from 1963, the other one I'm not sure, but around this time. There's no black and white, left or right to me anymore. There's only up and down is very close to the ground, and I'm trying to go up without thinking about anything trivial, such as politics. A very, very explicit rejection of, like, any sort of political thinking songwriting. And then another one when he's talking about...
And I think that quote, actually, Frank, the one you just read, I think he said that at, like, a political convention, like on a stage, like, not even just, like, in an interview, like, actively... I'll try and find where it said he did that. But yeah, actively kind of being a dick.
And then another one when being asked about, like, the political songs of, like, let's say Pete Seeger, Dylan said, songs like Which Side Are You On and I Love Porgy, they're not folk music songs, they're political songs, they're already dead. And obviously death is not very universally accepted. So this is someone who's very, like, aware of, like, what he was doing, and then decided to reject it at a certain point. It sounds like when he wanted to move up in the world.
Yeah, it's funny. After, like, seeing this movie, I mean, regardless, like, I do seem to go through, like, every 2 years, like, a Bob Dylan, like, redux where I just listen to Bob Dylan all the time, and then, like, I forget about him. So the movie, I had actually, like, been listening to songs again. I don't really know why. And then I didn't know the movie was coming out. And then I was like, oh, this is perfect, because I'm kind of, like, in this mood. And I got into the song, It's All Right, Ma. Do you know that song? And it's very much about, like, kind of, like, 50s, like, consumerism and, like, you know, like complicity, and like it's a very political song. And it's a very like anti like establishment song. And I read a quote that he said that like he's never been able to write songs that are as good as that again. Like that period of time, like you know, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think.
And then yet in the 70s, he writes George Jackson, Hurricane. It's fascinating. And I want that movie. Like, I want the movie about his struggle with that.
Maybe that time includes the 70s. I think that like that quote is coming from like now and then, a kind of like now and then.
Well, that was 63. He said that thing, I think. Yeah, he said that that there's no black and white, left and right.
I mean, honestly, I do think he's kind of a doofus. Like, I think he just like says a bunch of shit, and like, I trust him as an artist and the work, but like, I don't trust him. I mean, that's like Todd Haynes' whole thing. And like, I'm Not There, right? The movie about Bob Dylan that he made is like, there's so many Bob Dylans, and there's so much like mythology and so many like literal lies about like where he came from. And like, you know, that like, I kind of don't care in some ways, like what he says or what he thinks about those things now. I just really, I think this also is like kind of what I loved about the movie, is that even if it's a sort of like, whatever, shabby job, even if it's not like, you know, watching, I can't remember, like, what's the famous documentary about Bob Dylan where he's on tour? Is it Pennebaker? I don't remember who made that film right now. But even though it's like kind of basically like what you said, like a mediocre phoned in like biopic, it's still like, for me, is just so fun to sit there and think about that time. And and that music, to me, like what I love about it so much is that it is so specific, and it's just a time capsule of that moment. That's it. And it's like, you know, I mean, I guess you could say that I just feel like that his particular like oeuvre in that period is like just so perfectly captures like what's happening.
This is a question that I had written down that I wanted to ask the two of you, because I was thinking about this, and you're right, and I completely agree. His ability to witness what was happening in the world around him at this time and put it into like beautiful poetry is unparalleled, like without question. The question that I have is, as artists, is that enough of a contribution to those movements? I don't know. And I don't have an answer for this. You know, like, we know that like Pete Seeger and Joan Baez and Sylvie were like at the marches. They were organizing. They were on the ground doing shit. I never once saw Bob Dylan like, you know, tabling or knocking doors or like handing out flyers. I don't know if he did or not. I'm not saying one way or the other because I don't know enough about him. But is, as an artist, to reflect the time and to speak about the time and to kind of like hold up the mirror to society for a mass audience, because obviously he's reaching millions and millions of people, is that a contribution to a movement, or is that a reflection of a movement? I don't know. I don't have the answer to it.
I mean, me neither, but like, I will say, in this moment that we're in, where musicians neither sing about political issues nor take a position on anything publicly. Like, if you, I mean, for the most part, like, like what you were saying earlier, Rivka, about the genocide, like, you know, if someone were making songs about that right now, I don't know. I feel like it would feel, I mean, I know that there have been some songs made, like the Macklemore song and stuff, and actually I do feel like that had a catalyzing effect. I mean,
I do as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to say in our moment, that's so, where everyone's such a coward and like so devoid of any like integrity in this area at all, to even imagine. But I would imagine that at the time, like, it's all sort of feeding you, right? Like you're, what Bob Dylan's doing, which I think we can agree is like kind of just like what you said, like just kind of like witnessing and brilliantly like channeling the energy into songs and the stories into songs is just kind of part of a whole atmosphere of like trying to change the world.
Yeah. I love the scene in the movie where was that it was the Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
Yeah, where him and Joan sleep together for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, but before they sleep together for the first time, just I loved that, like the way they film. I wanted more stuff like that. Like even just like the way they filmed that, I wanted it to just be deeper and rawer, but I just loved the imagining of like, oh, okay, it made me feel like, okay, we've gone through this. This has happened before.
Yeah.
Artists are always an important part of the answer of how we survive it and how we reflect it. Like there was just something about how that was filmed where you get the sense of like packing your bag and not knowing where you should go. Like the horror of that moment, and then just like tracking Dylan as he ends up at the Gaslight singing this political song. It felt all so perfect. It was disappointing that it was like, and then the girl falls into his arms, because I'm like, yeah, like Joan Baez is not thinking about this in that way either. She's just there to be a damsel in distress. Like that was like bullshit. But that there was something there to speak to what you're saying, Frank, of like the value of, even if the song doesn't, like a reaction or reflection. But then I do think there's an integrity loss. I mean, again, it's the reason the film ends the way it does. You're like, Joan Baez was fucking incredible. Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, incredible. And we don't have to their songs don't have to get muddied down by like them being dicks. Like, it just feels very like, it feels unfortunate when this happens, when you're like, why not like, and I think sometimes capitalism and patriarchy wants you to believe like it's necessary to their talent. And it doesn't feel like, actually, maybe this film makes this point, it doesn't feel like him being, his like attitude and his feelings in that way have anything to do with him channeling. Like these songs are great. It's unfortunate that he's then a dick and like he has the power for that to affect those movements. He has the power to like tear down this festival at the end of the film. Like what a shitty fucking thing to do.
So shitty.
Is it?
I thought so. I was like, at least the way it was presented in the movie, I was like, you have the power. Like, I think they're all looking at him like, and even when Joan, I hated the writing here because I think it got it wrong, but where Joan goes to him at the end and she's like, let it go, Bobby, you won. And he's like, what did I win? And she's like, freedom from all of us and our shit. Isn't that what you wanted? It's yeah, you won, buddy. What are you doing? Why are you throwing a temper tantrum? Why can't you just sing this old man who gave you everything? This sweet
everything.
Man, why do you have to...
At least in the telling of this movie, yeah.
It's not going to stop you from, like... At least that's what I got. In no way was I like, you're going to be stopped from doing electric if you can't play at this festival in...
It's literally his buddy's festival, and Pete's like, yo, like, people are gonna really hate this, and maybe they won't come back this year. So just, like, for me as a buddy, don't, like, ruin my festival and, like, the potential future of it being sustainable. Just, like, play a few of the oldies and then go do your thing, please. Just, like, help a brother out here.
I thought it... I mean, I don't know if I just am, like, in the mood to be contrarian or what.
No,
but
please.
I thought it was a little bit more complicated than that. Like, at least, like, I actually don't know enough of this history, and, like, I kind of wish I did. That would be helpful right now. I did read that, like, actually, there were a lot of people in the audience who loved what Bob Dylan did, too.
Yeah.
But I see, first of all, the thing about him being a dick, like, yeah, I just see, like, he's, like, a man-child who's, like, 20 years old, like, suddenly famous and like having like women throw themselves at him, and he just like literally is like not at all mature enough to handle any of it. He's sort of like a bystander to like his own genius. Like that's how I see it. Like I just am like, that's why I'm like, I don't care about the person really. I mean, if he was like a rapist or something, I'd care about that. But like him just being like a dick, I don't know if I care that much about that. But all of that to say, I think that what they're what I see happening in that storyline that I thought was kind of more interesting than just like, oh, just be nice to Pete Seeger, like he did everything for you, is that what actually is happening is that whole thing is kind of dying. Like that movement is kind of dying. And they want to use him to keep it. They want to use him to keep it like going. So it's not so innocent. Like they're just like, you know, they're like, they found their like Trojan horse of like, you know, people lose their minds over this person. And it's like, this is great for our movement. This is great for the folk movement. But at the beginning of the film, when Pete and Bob are in the car listening to music, he puts on Little Richard. Bob Dylan does, and he's like, this is Little Richard, like, I love this so much. And Pete Seeger's like, well, you know, you can do a lot with just a guitar and a stage, and, you know, like, that's what I believe anyway. Do you believe that? And Bob Dylan's like, I like a lot of, like, he accidentally fell into this movement. Like, he didn't actually, I don't think he had those beliefs, really.
He didn't, but then he made himself inside of it, and because of it, I think that's the part that feels like little boy.
He did. I think it's definitely a both and situation where he did do that, and he was also like, you know, like they were more than happy to have him like reaching a larger audience with their message that was very much like their message and their interest, right?
Well, it's Pete Seeger's like shovel story that he tells him at like 7 a.m. when he like quietly wakes him up.
Everyone's coming along with a little teaspoon, and dang it, Bobby, if you didn't show up with a whole shovel for that bucket.
First of all, amazing impression.
Thank you so much.
Second of all, I loved seeing Edward Norton in this like kind of like somewhat emasculated, like feminized role, like of just him being like this kind of doddering, like older, like Bobby, you know, like it was just fun to see him in that role. Like I've never seen him play a character like that before.
It was great. And you're absolutely right in that Seeger wants to use Bob to keep the folk scene going. And like that is clearly highlighted in that metaphor that he lays out. And it's also shown in that same scene, which I thought is even more telling, is when Bob is like, yo, I sent you my new record. Did you even listen to it? And it's clear that Seeger had not. And you're like, oh, a friend, regardless, would have like listened to your shit, you know, and would have been like,
it's this orthodoxy. They're like, they have this orthodoxy that like, again, I feel like looking back now too, like, can we agree that maybe they weren't like on the right side? Like, it's not
for sure.
Like,
totally.
It's not like categorically like, yes, he should have never gone electric. Like, it's a great story. And like, you know, he really shook things up, and like they took it really seriously. I mean, I thought that the movie made them look kind of insane, like with the cutting of the cables and stuff. Like I was like, dude, like
no, the movie clearly frames like, especially the Norbert Leo Butz character as like, my God, my dude, just chill out a little bit. Like art is always evolving. Music is always evolving. This isn't a classical music festival. Why? Because no one's listening to it anymore. So like, just accept that. And like the going electric part, that's not the part I'm pushing back on. I'm just saying
at the festival.
At the festival, if Pete Seeger is my buddy who literally helped launch my entire career, and he's like, bro, please just don't fuck up my festival. Like, I really care about this thing. Just do a homie a favor and just don't fuck it up for me. Just don't make everyone hate this and then not come back next year. Then go do whatever you want. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and the fact that they are so orthodox and they're holding on, but they're holding on because I guess what they're holding on to, it's so sad that they're losing in some ways because it is so tied to this movement. And there was that moment, like, again, that they throw away those lines, but they're like, nothing's changing, so just get cool. Like, I was kind of scared and sad, like, oh my God, they did build this movement, and there were protests, and these were protest songs, and you don't get the sense that, like, that has a place in this new space, at least that they're aware of. Like, they're very portrayed as like, put on our sunglasses and like, we just want to play electric.
But as you said, they are still protest songs, like the Hurricane song.
Later
like,
they are, but in this like moment, it just felt very like that wasn't there. It felt very like kid. Like, I think that's why I thought that was part of what was deeper to like Pete Seeger and all of them were like, there's a politic here that we're trying to push forward. We're trying to change the world. I guess it felt so sad that you're like, you don't have to spit on it. Like, you already won. You do have the power. You're famous. They're losing. That's what it just felt like to. I'm like, they've lost. And I think that's what Joan was saying.
I think he might have also thought, like, you guys need to change, you know, whether he was right or not. Like, I think he might have also thought, like, that Joan, like, he had his opinions about all of these people and their like limitations or whatever, you know.
Ugh,
and
that line made me cringe. The first thing he says to Joan Baez when he's like, after like, yeah, after these
in the dentist's office,
that she's not a writer, she writes it, and she just kind of takes it. Like,
I totally believe that he would have said some shitty thing like that. I mean, yeah, like, I think he was probably like a sexist person. I mean, definitely. I just think he was. Like, I think he probably didn't treat the women in his life
on these streets, apparently. This is not journalism, but this is just things I've heard. Like, he's still out there in his old age, like, trying to get some young women, you know, give out some backstage passes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I'm, first of all, like, how amazing that you have access to, like,
I mean, this is like a story after a story after a story. Like, you know what I mean? This is like, my friend had a friend.
Like, where does he live? In Malibu or something like that? I think, maybe.
Like, I'd be curious. Oh, no. I was about to say something really divisive, and I'm holding back, actually.
Really? Are you sure you want to hold back?
Just like, I'm thinking about all these artists who, and I don't think he would play, obviously I'm like, that would be insane. I don't think he would play at Trump's inauguration, but I could see like a moment of like, don't fucking tell me who I am.
I know what you mean. I don't think he would actually do it, but I can definitely, I know what you're saying about him being like, rather than like, it's a type, right? Like, it's a kind of, like, I feel like I had a boyfriend like this. It's like, the type is not even like exactly like like opinionated or like has a politic, but it's a type that's just like, I won't be labeled and I won't be like put in a box, and I'm gonna be like, really, if you think you know what I am, like, I'm gonna like pull the rug out from under you and like remind you that you don't, and like just, and it's like a very reactive kind of like personality.
Right, he says that in that scene in the, like, yeah, when he leaves the party and he's in the scene in the elevator where he's sort of making the turn to like Electric Dylan, and that guy who ends up in his band is like, well, he's like, I don't want to be anything that they want me to be. So he's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, no, he says, they should fuck off and let me be me. And he's like, be what? He's like, I don't know, whatever it is they don't want me to be. Like,
right, exactly.
And politically, yeah. I do think that is a really fucking scary ideology. Like, I do think that is like happens. So where you're just like, that's when you get the head spinny, like, wait, were you? That's like very Joe Rogan, you know, where you're like, I'm sorry.
It's reactive contrarianism.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you say that I'm not allowed to say these slurs anymore? Well, now I love saying slurs.
Yeah, like finally I'm allowed, you know, Trump's in office. I can finally say like all the things that I'm not allowed to say.
Right. And I do feel like he was painted with a large hint of that.
In one of the normie movie podcasts I listened to about this movie, one of them was a very big Dylan fan, and they were like, I really appreciated that this movie did paint him as a dick, because he is kind of like famously a dick. Apparently Joan Baez, like, her opinion is always like, I fucking hate him, but I fucking love him. He's such a prick. Like, so that is true to life. But also that he was an opportunist and very much wanted to climb the ladder of success within music, within, you know, and his own fame and everything.
He's ambitious. And
this isn't a perfect metaphor, don't at me, but I kind of feel like Bob Dylan is the Barack Obama of folk music. You know?
Wow.
He came up
Layers.
as a part of the movement around the people who were doing the work. And then the first chance he got, he was like, this is all about me now, baby. I'm doing my own thing. I'm maintaining power. I'm reinforcing the status, maybe not the status quo. That's not as much a Dylan thing. But again, not a perfect metaphor, but I was like, there's a little bit of Obama here. There's a little bit of Obama.
I mean, I don't think there's anything like status quo about it, though. And I don't think there's anything. No. I think there's more. If it's, I think it's more like it's just like an ego thing. Like he's like that ego of his is a real liability. But it's also, you know, like here he is, like still like a famous person with people making movies about him. Like,
yeah. And Obama is like a generational political talent and one of like the greatest like rhetoricians of our time. And like, how cool would it have been if he had just like really doubled down on like the movement that got him here and was like, no, I'm actually I mean,
people like that don't become presidents, so it just would have never happened. So
yeah, this is a whole other podcast. I beg to differ. I push back a little bit on that because if you go back to some of Obama's like '08 campaign speeches, he was
I canvassed for Obama, and I will never canvass for a Democrat again, but I did do that.
But he was channeling real populism.
I know he was
naming enemies. He was saying like the rich and the powerful, like these are the people who have to pay, these are the people who are responsible. Like he knew that there was a real populist grassroots energy, and then it was once he got into office, man. Then when he got into office, he was like, nah. I'm going to bail out the banks.
Like, this just falls apart for me.
It's not a one-to-one. I'm saying it's not a one-to-one.
It's not a one-to-one. Going electric, like those songs were still really good and political. Like Obama was sending drones out. Like it's just, they are not the same.
Look, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying it is not a perfect metaphor, but it's just like,
But I like it because it's provocative.
It's definitely provocative. We're going to get a ton of engagement on social with this for sure. People are going to hate me forever. Did either of you have anything else you wanted to hit before we go to the awards?
I don't think so. I mean, we said the thing that I really I had to say just because I truly felt embarrassed after I saw this movie and my friends were like, that was a misogynist piece of shit. And I was like, right. I was like,
oh yeah.
True.
For sure. For sure.
100%.
Well,
and
in your defense, I do think the women in this movie tried really hard to save it with their acting. I actually thought they like stole the movie. I think Timothy was amazing. I think they stole the fit. Like they were so filled. Like there were just moments that I'm like, oh, all of the like everything that Joan can't say is happening here. She's just now going to have to say something else. But they at least just filled it with all that contradiction, which was pretty damn skillful. So I can understand why it could be, you're like, well, I saw there was some of that there.
I think for me, it was just simply like a sort of like what you said at the beginning. Like I saw it on Christmas Day. I love Bob Dylan. I loved hearing the songs. I explained it to someone like, and this probably isn't a good metaphor either, but like when there's a book that you really like and then they make a movie out of it. And it's like really curious to see like who they like cast as like this book that you've been reading like over and over again your whole life. Like even if just the idea of that is kind of like fun and engaging to think about, like Edward Norton playing Pete Seeger and like Timothée Chalamet, who I expected to be bad and who was not. I thought very slight hints of caricature here and there with the like little voice and stuff, but like mostly I thought he did really well. So I think
could have gone very badly.
It could have gone very badly. Like, and it wasn't none of that was terrible. It was actually like kind of impressive, the musicality of it.
I did wish though with I agree with everything you're saying, Riva, about Elle Fanning and Monica Barbaro. I thought they were phenomenal. I enjoyed their performances. Even actually, because Monica Barbaro was nominated for an Oscar, Elle Fanning was not. I thought Elle Fanning kind of ran away with it for me on my watch. I was like, she's great in this. I just wish, I wish they had more agency. I wish we got more side of their stories. I wish when Elle Fanning leaves and she says to him, she gives him like the spinning plates metaphor. She was like, I'm one of the spinning plates. You're the guy spinning the plates. You have like all these other plates that you're spinning. But she still has to like remain reverent to Bob Dylan, rather than being like,
that's the problem.
Bro, you only show up and care about me when you want to. And that's fucked up. And like, you suck because of that. She still has to like leave being like, you're a genius, but I got to let you go because you're more important than
You're
me.
eclipsing me, and and as you should, or something like.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're bigger than I am, and I can't keep up. And it's like, fuck, like, Nick, get out of here. You are awesome, Susie.
Yeah,
like,
and I
or
wonder
Sylvie.
about like the veracity of that, you know? Like, I mean, we'll never know, I guess, but like if that was really what her thinking would have been. Like, she's very smart. I'm sure she.
I know the reason she's not named by name is because Dylan, that was like the one character he was like.
Because he loved her, I think. He cared about her a lot.
I'm like, all those other hoes.
There were many. They also like left out his by that time he would have been married once too, which they didn't even include in.
Yeah, so odd.
Interesting.
Odd.
Okay.
I mean, this is a whole thing about biopics in general where I'm like, wow, they really take so much agency. And it's like, if you see this, you're just going to think that this is true. You're not going to question it. I just think that's really bizarre. Anyway.
It's hard. All right. So I think it's about time we give this movie some awards. Svetlana, our first award is Best Politics. This goes to the character in the movie with the best politics.
I think it has to be the Sylvie Susie character.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
For all the aforementioned reasons.
Or Guthrie.
Or Guthrie. I mean, we don't really get much of Guthrie other than he's in a bed.
As presented in the movie.
As presented in the movie, we're not getting much
from anyone else.
From anyone else, yeah. I mean, Pete Seeger, we do actually have, like, that is probably the most political act scene, is like him in the courtroom.
Not naming names,
taking out his guitar, being like, I will use this as a political weapon. So in some ways, like...
Although I'm holding a little bit against Seeger because, as we discussed, he was kind of using Dylan.
What's wrong with that?
That's true.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, I mean, you know, I personally think that's, like, smart. Yeah, he was like, our political movement needs, like, you have great songs. This is great. Your songs are political. Why wouldn't they be part of a...
It could be a tie between Sylvie, Susie, and Pete Seeger.
I'm okay with that.
I think, and also, I guess while we're talking about Sylvie, once you read about her, you're like, she's even more political than they. It was odd because watching her without any context, I was like, is she bourgeoisie? Like, I couldn't really get a grasp of, like, does she have just money? Like, why does she get to go to all these classes? Like, it felt like she could have been that, and she so was not, which, you know, was nice to find out. Like, you know, but if we're going with what's in the movie, yes. We'll give it to both of them.
All right, our next award is Worst Politics. Goes to the character with the worst politics in the movie.
Maybe the manager.
Is that the Dan Fogler character? Like the main manager with the curly hair that we see throughout?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's politics exactly, but he didn't have like any like integrity or like he didn't have a soul. It seemed
he was the closest to capital for sure.
The whole like little gaggle of record executives, whatever. I think we can safely assume that they are just in it for the money. They're simply extracting value from these artists.
Like, you want to play Trump's inauguration? Yeah. What's the deal? How much can we get you?
Yeah, come on.
They're offering quite a lot. Yeah.
Red looks good on you.
Yeah, I think it goes to the manager. I don't even remember the character's name, but him and
Albert Grossman.
Albert Grossman, yeah. All those guys.
And the last award goes to Better Supporting Character. The supporting character that this movie should actually be about. Usually I find like fun little ones, but like in this case, I'm like, does Joan Baez I know there's a documentary, but is there a
biopic? No, I don't think so. I mean, I thought, I like loved that the Monica Barbaro, is that you said her name is? I thought she was so good, and she really sang, and her voice was incredible. For me, it's a toss-up between her and Sylvie. Or, like, how about just the women of the movie?
Yeah.
Like, just the women, like, who were all supporting characters. Like, if it was just more about them, that would be cool.
That would be cool. I would watch that movie. Like, this movie told from their vantage point would be very fun. I'm also just super interested in the folk music scene and how it was like deeply embedded in the civil rights struggles of these times. I maybe there's a movie about that, but I would love to dig deeper into about like how all of these artists became radicalized, what they meant to the movement, their actual involvement in it. I think that's very compelling to me. And I feel like a story that we need in this moment, especially as you mentioned, Svetlana, we're in a world of artistic cowards these days. So
yeah, that would be great. Agreed.
This was very fun. Thank you so much for choosing this movie. As I mentioned before we started recording, last thing we like to do is ask our guest, is there one thing you're doing in your everyday life where you get the chance to practice your anti-capitalist values? And that could be anything from an organization you work with to like a practice you engage in.
In my everyday life is the hard part. Like,
it doesn't have to be every day, but like, you know.
I mean, I'm very engaged and I'm constantly, I have brilliant people around me and we're always talking about what's happening and like refining our points of view. And I'm not an organizer myself, but I'm very happy to have people in my life who do that work. And I'd like to think that I'm available to be a foot soldier in some regard.
I love that. I think like it can't be underestimated how important talking, like unity, this idea of like unity struggle, unity critiquing, like debating with friends so that you can get a clearer point and understand the why, like why electric.
It's bonding too. I mean,
it's bonding. Yeah,
it's like, it's really, especially with the Palestine stuff, I feel like I've been on a journey with people in my life of like just continuing to unpack and understand this horrific situation and just not try my best to like not like get used to it.
I'm so glad you brought this up. This is such a good one. This is, I think, truly, I think having these conversations, especially with people who are that like you don't agree with, like even like the people you agree with, yes, and refining those points of view, but the people that you don't agree with, or the people that are like curious. I have had, and this has given me a lot of hope, I have had like several very deep convos with people who we'd call traditionally more like liberal Democratic Party voters in the past few weeks, especially now that Trump is back in office, who have been like, hey dude, like I really need to do something. I really need to like get involved. Like, and I need some direction. And I've been like, fuck yeah. Like, let's talk about it. Like, here are the resources. Here's the stuff. Like, check this out, whatever. So it's so important. It's very important. Svetlana, where can our audience find you if you would like them to? If not, we can tell them don't even bother.
I mean, I'm on Instagram and at Svetlana Kitto, and my writing is all over the internet.
Awesome. We'll be sure to link to that in the episode description. Thank you again for being here. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
To get ourselves a treat.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you would like to support the show and get access to our Patreon episodes, that link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com.
Also, a reminder that we donate our ad space. So if you're part of a leftist or progressive organization and you would like to run an ad on this program, email us at moviesvscapitalism@gmail.com.
For next week, we will be watching the 1996 comedy Big Night with a very, very special guest, my father.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
To get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.